We kick things off with a couple of cute slave girls asking our hero why he ended up buying them. His name seems to be Alan, and these girls want to know his intentions for them. Alan is put in a tough spot as he needs to answer his slaves right now, so he says that he wants to free the world from hunger. However, it is quite clear that he has a ton of intrusive thoughts for these girls, just like any other man would. Now, in order to figure out how Alan got here, we are taken to flashback where he tells us that he saw a pure white space before him. A goddess showed up at the time, and her smile was much more beautiful than any human woman he had ever seen in his life. Of course, this meant that he had passed away, but for some reason, our hero was excited to learn it. As a matter of fact, it seems as if he was waiting for this moment to happen. After all, it is the staple of most web novels for the hero to be reincarnated by a goddess. Alan already starts thinking about being sent to another world where he will become the most powerful hero. He feels he will be given skills that no one else in that world will possess, and he will use his influence to do shady things with cute girls. This is when we also learn that Alan was 30 years old at the time of his passing, and he still did not know the touch of a woman by then. This is his chance to say goodbye to his innocence and become a true player. The goddess is glad to see that he was woken up, but she starts describing his past life as that of a total loser, especially when it comes to women. Our hero is not pleased to hear this, but it's the truth, so he can't even give a response to it. Luckily for him, he had a younger sister in his past life who used to mock him all the time. Not that it is a good thing, but at least Alan is used to verbal abuse, so he does not get too affected by the words of the goddess. He has other things to worry about, so he asks the heavenly woman who she really is. She explains that she is an immortal being, and the people of his world refer to her as a goddess. Now that it is confirmed for Alan that he is no longer alive, he wishes to know how he went. The goddess explains that he bumped into a girl who fell from a building, and the impact of that collision destroyed his spinal cord. That's when Alan remembers that he had actually tried to save a girl falling off a building when he was on his way back home from overtime at his job. The goddess doesn't stop here, and she continues to mock Alan by saying he fell prey to the girl's She even smiles and asks if Alan enjoyed it, but our hero does not understand why a goddess is trolling him. He does admit that he enjoys the wonders of the female body, but in such a situation, he could not even feel the softness of the woman's. At the end of the day, he was not at all satisfied by the encounter, but he wants to know what happened to the girl who fell on him. The goddess tells him not to worry about that, because she was saved thanks to his body serving as a cushion. Alan is glad to hear that his passing was not in vain, and the goddess reveals that she saved his mortal life in order to reward his good deeds. This is why she wants to give him a second chance at life, and simply hearing this makes Alan think about all the shady things he will do once reincarnated. The goddess does reveal that our hero will be sent to a fantasy world of swords and magic. However, the system is a bit different here, as the goddess explains that he will not be reincarnated as a fresh body, but will rather possess the body of another person. Naturally, Alan is a bit confused, and he wants to know the difference between this and normal reincarnation. The goddess explains that in her realm, there are tons of reincarnations going on, but there are not enough vessels to hold all the souls coming her way. In order to ease her own workload, she and other goddesses like her end up choosing bodies of people from the native worlds and have the souls possess them instead of reincarnating them as a fresh person. Alan is not too sure of why she is referring to this as work, but the goddess says that she has it rough over here. She then shows our hero the boy he will be possessing, and it turns out that his name is actually Alan, which will be taken over by our hero. Alan seems to have a nice face, and he looks like a young teenage boy. Our hero then gets excited because with Alan's body and face, he is sure to get all the girls in this world. The goddess adds that she can finally grant him the wish that he so desperately wanted, especially with that innocent body of his. Alan is not impressed by the way she is mocking him, and he says that she is playing with his emotions as easily as she breathes. He then thinks that she should toy with his elephant instead of him if she is so keen. Of course, the goddess can hear his thoughts, so she asks him if he wants to lose his life again. Alan mentions that he did not even say a single word, and she should not be peeking into his thoughts. He then theorizes that in this possession, his soul and Alan's soul will share the same body. In this case, there will be two personalities within the same person, which sounds interesting, but won't be possible as per the goddess. She says that the personality of the original Alan will cease to exist, so it's a bit of an anticlimax. Our hero is told that since the boy is a novice adventurer who was raised in an orphanage, he will lose his life in a starting dungeon. Once his soul leaves his body, the goddess will send our hero's soul into the same body and take over it. Alan is a bit conflicted on this because he will essentially be hijacking another boy's body. This also leads him to speculate on something, which is that Alan will end up as monster food if his body just lies in the dungeon. He does not wish to possess the body of a zombie because he has already been called smelly multiple times in his past life. The goddess explains that he does not need to worry about such things as he will be given a special privilege in this world. This is the skill of regeneration, which means that Alan will be able to heal all his injuries and wounds, no matter how many times he gets hurt. She adds that the skill will get activated the moment Alan's body is taken over by his soul. Effectively, he will be a brand new boy when he possesses the body. It all makes sense to Alan now, and he walks himself through the process of waking up inside another boy's body. It's a bit crazy though, because he will be cheating death the whole time, which is against the rules of life. In essence, he is being given a triple S tier cheat skill to enjoy in this world. Once again, he imagines how he will use this skill to gain favor with women and do unspeakable things to them. But such things can be expected from an untouched boy. The goddess is done with the simple explanations, so she asks Alan if there's anything else he'd like to ask her. Naturally, he says no because he just wants to go out there and conquer all the cute girls of this new world. After all, in his opinion, there is no need to waste any time and shrink away when a glorious future awaits him. With that, the goddess gets the message and decides to begin the process. Alan is super excited for what this new life will hold for him, and he openly claims that he is going to become a harem king. Now, he gets transported to the world, but things are not what they seem. Alan tells us that he had thought life would be easy for him over here, but it has actually turned out to be a bit different. 3 years have passed since he has come to this world, but Alan is still an untouched boy and is about to set a whole new record for how long a man can maintain his innocence. Not only has he not been able to hold a girl's hand, Alan can't even have a proper chat with one. He feels as if this is some kind of cruel joke or a bad dream, but there also appear to have been a few miscalculations. The first point is that it's really hard to defeat monsters, even if they are as weak as a slime. Alan confesses that if he were to fight one, then he would normally be the one to lose. The second point is that you can't learn magic by leveling up, which is a big disadvantage. The goddess had forgotten to say this to him back then, so she showed up in a dream to explain it. This means that Alan can't really make it big in this world the way he thought he would. The only thing he has going for him is the regeneration skill, which does not require a lot of mana, and still has a strong activation. This brings him to his third point, which is that it's impossible to cut his pain receptors. In essence, Alan can heal his injuries, but he can still feel the pain that is caused from them. We can see how tough he has it when he runs away from a small slime and complains about the pain being too much for him to handle. Basically, Alan is like a loser in this world whom no one would want to take as a companion. This brings him to his fourth point, which is that he can't form a party. In essence, he can't use his regeneration skill in front of other people, but only because he wants to keep it a secret. We see Alan using the heal skill again, and as his wound disappears, he admits that he does possess the power of a god. In this world, The heal skill, which helps you cure yourself, is considered to be a miracle art. This is as per the words of the Holy Church, which is seemingly a dangerous organization. Not only has it collected money and authority, the church can also take over the political empire of this kingdom, if it wanted to. We learn that regeneration is a superior version of the healing power, so Alan does not want people from the church to have their eyes on his cheat skill. This was the 5th point. He did not calculate, because the church is going to get in his way if he displays his power too often. Of course, giving up just because of such an inconvenience is not like our hero, and he believes that if anyone else was in his place, they would have overlooked this major detail. Having said that, Alan finally arrives where he's been wanting to come for a long time, and it happens to be the slave trader joint. He comments that his brain does not have a lot of IQ points, but it did gain a flash of insight. If he is not able to find companions for his adventure, he might as well go for a slow-paced lifestyle instead. After all, he has saved enough money by doing a side job at a healing clinic for 3 years. With a slave, he will be able to give her any order he likes, and she will have to obey him. On top of that, due to the slave crest, he does not need to worry about the slave revealing his regeneration skills to anyone else. Alan's plan is perfect in his opinion, and he feels that this will be the start of his harem life. Our hero enters the slave house and comes across the main slave trader. He looks quite scary and almost like a villain, but he politely asks Alan what kind of slave he would like. Of course, our hero knows that he can't be caught lacking, so he'll have to maintain his stance. However, he enables a falsetto voice that makes him sound like a little girl when he says he wants to see all that's on sale. The slave trader gives him a quick view of the slave girls on offer, and then he asks him if there was anything that caught his eye. Alan tells us that the only thing which stood out to him was the pricing of these slaves, because there are way too many zeros for him to count. Anyway, it's not like he was not prepared for this, so he carries on with the chat. He feels that this is the time to unveil his intelligence and go on a bargain attack. Alan strikes a pose and asks the slave trader if he has anything else to offer, and this seems to startle the scary seller. Of course, this was just a bluff, but it seemed to have worked, and our hero is ready to buy the slaves that the trader was not able to sell. He admits that he has already been shown everything, so it might be a bit tricky for the slave trader. He then looks at the clueless seller and hopes for him to have something else on offer. After an awkward pause, the slave trader decides to take him to a shady area in his already shady store. Our hero is shocked to see the state of this place, and he wonders if people can even be kept in such conditions. That's when Alan notices a couple of slave girls who are not in the best of condition. These girls look like they've been terribly battered, and even the look they give Alan shows that they have seen some horrible days. Our hero asks the slave trader who these girls are, as he is completely shocked to see the state of their bodies. The slave trader states that the girl with the knife ears is an ancient elf, which is actually a superior breed of elves. The other girl happens to be an elder dwarf, which is also a rare species. Normally, if these girls were in normal condition, then they would have both been special rank as slaves. However, since they are battered and injured, he can afford them. He tells the slave trader that he will purchase both these girls and is given a rather troubling price. As a matter of fact, it's so high that it will blow all his savings away in the blink of an eye. Even so, our hero wants to return dignity to these girls as soon as possible. Now, Alan purchases the slave girls and takes them away from the shop. He manages to reach a spot where he is sure no one will be able to see him, but the girls worry that he might try something shady. He reassures them that he is not a creep, and there is no reason for the girls to be afraid of him. Of course, the girls are not going to believe such a simple line, so Alan tells them that he understands how much they must have endured to reach this state. Having said that, our hero goes on to use his regeneration skills on them, and they are back to prime form in a matter of seconds. Now, Alan may have noble intentions in his mind for such an action, But then he sees how cute the girls are, and his intrusive thoughts take over his mind once again. The ancient elf is shocked and in disbelief over the fact that her body and her eyes are all back to normal. Even the elder dwarf can't believe her own eyes when she sees that her hands are back. Naturally, this is a great moment for the girls, but Alan has been presented with an odd situation. Of course, he did want to have cute slave girls with him for his journey, but he did not expect the girls to be even prettier than the goddess who sent him here. They don't look anything like the state in which he had bought them, so it's a bit of a pleasant surprise for Alan. Our hero wonders how he should speak with these girls and accidentally uses the word mommy, but then the girls ask him for his name. Alan tries his best to say his name, but he accidentally bites his tongue in the process. It's a hilarious scene as the girls wonder why their new master is fumbling, but Alan realizes that he needs to calm down right now. After all, he finally has a harem in another world. Now that he has achieved his dream, Alan feels that he will finally be able to live out his intrusive thoughts in grand fashion with his slave girls. At least that's how a normal man would look at it. Unfortunately for Alan, he had messed up big time by blowing all of his life savings on these two girls. Since he has no money left to pay even for an inn, he has been forced to live in the open, and that too inside a monastery deep in the mountains. If that isn't bad enough, he also has to provide for his new slave girls, which means he has an extra responsibility now. To put it bluntly, he's very broke and in desperate need of support. It's at this very moment that the goddess shows up in his thoughts and makes fun of our hero for not planning ahead. Of course, Alan does not appreciate this, and he tells her that she can't just barge into his monologue just because she is a goddess. She makes fun of him yet again by saying it doesn't cost anything for him to have her inside his thoughts. But he has had enough, so he tells her to get lost. This is a hilarious situation for sure, and it looks like Alan has not planned for other things as well. Of course, he only wanted to hear his slave girls singing praises for him due to his heroic acts. It's intrusive thoughts such as these that have led to his current lack of funds. However, despite all his efforts, he is only continuing his record of holding on to his innocence. This is shameful for Alan because he is basically not able to eat a meal, even though it has been presented to him openly. Now, we learn that the ancient elf is named Sylphie, and the elder dwarf is named Noel. They are both extremely rare races in this world, which is why almost everything about them is a mystery. The reason for this is that he is not able to read or write the language of the New World. The goddess had left him a note saying he could learn the language himself, but Alan knows that there is a lot for him to understand in his appraisal scroll. Our hero remembers that this is not the time for him to act like a loser and worry and despair because he has a job to do and mouths to feed. He decides to grow some food as soon as possible, and he thinks this will be an easy task since he has the knowledge of growing crops from his original world. However, as he begins with his methods, Sylphie comes up to him and asks what he's doing here. Alan is so blinded by her beauty that he loses his own train of thought and gazes at her for a bit. He soon snaps back to reality and says that he is trying to grow some yams. Clearly, the elf girl has no idea what he means by this. He asks her if she does not like yams, but then she says that she's more interested to know how he's going to grow them. Alan worries that his slave girl will not want to eat the yams that have been tended to by an untouched boy such as himself. Additionally, he feels that his slaves are not happy with him as a master and want to be sustainable by themselves. He can't bear the humiliation of his own thoughts, so he figures a way to walk off, thus confusing Sylphie completely. He rushes away to get some food, and he hopes that the girls won't have to sleep under the sky and stay hungry for long. Then, he goes to town to buy some good and brings it back for the slave girls. Alan knows this has taken a toll on his wallet, but he's hoping the extra meat will make the girls nicer to cuddle with. He offers food to Sylphie and Noel, but they look a bit wary, so he tells them it's fine to have it. They thank him and he tries to be nice, but he feels they still don't trust him yet. This is a problem for our hero because at this rate, he will never be able to act out his intrusive thoughts with his slaves. He needs these girls to be open with him as soon as possible. But that does not look likely as of now. Alan needs to find some work so that he can pay for his own meal now. But all he manages to nibble on is some bait. Now, our hero heads to town, and he tells the girls to wait for him, which is quite surprising for the both of them. He asks if they want anything in particular to eat, but the girls both say no. This is not good for Alan because he genuinely does not know what to get them from the market. Anyway, he decides to head off, after which we finally get to see what the slave girls are thinking. Sylphie can't believe that her master has just casually walked off and left his slaves all by themselves. The elf girl then tells us that even though she and Noel have slave crests, it will not be too hard for them to break away from them, and they both have regained their original powers. She wonders if this is a ploy from Alan to test their loyalty. But what confuses her even more is the fact that he wanted to grow yams all by himself. She would actually be extremely useful for this, as she is an ancient elf who has the power to grow plants with her magic. After all, the appraisal scroll has all of this written down, so her master's actions are quite confusing for the elf girl. As a matter of fact, her powers will make the growing process almost instant. This means that Alan does not need to toil away like a laborer each and every day. All he needs to do is give Sylphie the order, and she will obey. The elf girl is totally clueless when it comes to her master because she wants to be of use to him. He did restore her body, so she is extremely grateful to him. But despite owning her and Noel, Sylphie has no idea why he is not doing shady things with them. So basically, Alan has everything set for him to live out his fantasy, but he doesn't make use of it at all. This actually leads her to think that he has some other plan once he wins her and Noel over. Of course, it's not that deep, but she does not know that Alan is as clueless as a baby in this world. In order to confirm her suspicions, Sylphie follows her master around town and notices that he is working at a healing clinic to earn some money. She is amazed to see him healing a young girl, but she wonders why he is not using restoration, which was what he used on them. If the church were to learn about this skill, then they will give him the highest post and honor in their office. This way, our hero will never have to worry about money ever again. There are lots of questions in Sylphie's mind, but she has to come back to her senses to see what Alan is doing. He gets done with his treatment and has a friendly little chat with the girl, which makes him appear like an angel. Sylphie becomes even more suspicious because Alan is seeming too good to be true. After all, a person who buys slaves is not exactly known to be a good person in this world. On top of that, he does not want anything from the slaves he owns either. So Sylphie really can't crack his persona yet. It really frustrates her not to be able to decipher her master, even though he is a man of culture who enjoys the simple things in life, such as comparing a cloud to a girl's curvy body. Since this time, around 3 months have passed and Alan is still stuck doing the same old thing. Now, the yams have finally been harvested, so he can treat his slaves to a new meal. However, Sylphie is at her wit's end, so she asks him why he is not using her to grow his food. Our hero wonders if his slave girls want to do farm work, but that is not needed from them at all since he can use his restore skill again and again to regain his stamina. Also, he wants to brag about how he supported 2 rare species all by himself. He decides to thank Sylphie for offering help, but it does not look like he is going to ask for it. This is when the elf girl decides to show off her own skills, and she tells him that her tree magic can harvest crops immediately. She goes on to summon a tree filled with yams, and it shocks Alan like nothing else he has seen in this world so far. He takes a moment to realize what he has just witnessed, and he wants to know what kind of cheat skill this is. He thinks that Sylphie has been hiding her powers from him all this time, but she is of the opinion that he has known about her skills right from the start. This is when it finally hits Alan that the slave girls and their powers would all have been mentioned in his appraisal scroll. Unfortunately, he can't read that piece of paper at all. which is why he has found himself in such a situation. Alan considers telling the girls the truth, which is that he is pretty much like a child in this world who can't read or write. However, he can't just tell the girls that their master is a baby because he feels they already don't think too highly of him. He finds the whole thing a bit shameful because a man has to look good before his girl. Having said this, he feels that he should just tell them an awkward lie and be done with it. He has to think of something fast. Otherwise, the slave girls might think that he has some odd liking for yams. This situation continues to grow funnier with each passing second, so Alan needs to be quick with his wit. He just has to ensure that he is not looked at as a creep. But this may be a bit tougher than he had expected. Our hero needs to raise his worth in front of his slave girls, so he ends up with a crazy story. He strikes a pose and tells them that magic is like a coin with two sides. Depending on the user, it can either be used as a cure or a curse. This is exactly why he has decided never to force others to use magic for him. If they are to use their powers, then they must do so of their own free will. He also says that the thought of being able to do anything he wants is a very dangerous one and can lead to serious issues. Of course, this is all just a big fat lie, because this is exactly how he was thinking when he had bought the slaves in the first place. He wanted to do all kinds of shady things to them, but it was the lack of cash that turned him into a laborer. Either way, he smiles and tells the girls that they should not force themselves to do anything with their magic. It's a bit too embarrassing for him to continue like this, so he decides to walk away from the scene over the excuse of harvesting. This display gets Sylphie thinking about her master in a different way now. She had initially thought that if she would show him her magic, then he would reveal his true colors. After all, it's hard to put up an act when you see something like a magic tree. However, she feels she was wrong to assume anything about Alan, because even though his expression had changed, it felt as if her magic opened up a wound that was deep inside his heart. Basically, she thought that Alan was suffering from something with the way he was speaking to her. This is when she convinces herself that her master has experienced the same thing as she did earlier. She feels that he had also lost himself to his own powers of restoration, and it might have led him down the wrong path. Then, something may have happened that changed his views on life, which is why he is not ready to show off his powers to anyone. It actually reminds Sylphie of the time she used to flaunt her own powers as well. It's something she feels ashamed of now, so she decides to do something nice for her master. She goes to Noel and asks her for some time, because she wants to discuss the future of their relationship with Alan. We see this the very next day when our hero is stumped to find a whole collection of fruits and vegetables in front of his very eyes. Of course, to have so many plants in the span of one night has to be Sylphie's doing, as it is basically a cheat code for growing harvests. This is clearly a lot more useful than toiling away for hours, so Alan feels as if his thunder has been stolen. We also learn that he was secretly hoping to become a master cultivator of agriculture. The elf girl greets him and says that she has also decided to harvest crops for him, but he asks her why she used her magic. Sylphie makes a cute face and asks her master if she was too hasty in doing this, even if it was of her own free will. Alan realizes that this is because of what he told the girls yesterday, so he wonders if Sylphie is trying to find fault with him. He was hoping to use his earth knowledge to become unbeatable in the field of growing crops, but that clearly is not the case now. On top of that, he fears that the girls might look at him even more unfavorably now because he can't even manage to use their powers, but still wants to keep feeding them yams. Alan decides to regain his composure, and then he tells the girls that they did not need to do this. Sylphie says it's fine, and then she decides to make breakfast with Noel, probably so that they can be nice to their master. However, Alan feels like he can't show off to them anymore. This is when he asks the girls to wait, because he does have one last thing to flaunt. It's basically him trying to do the whole do-it-yourself cheat, wherein he makes concrete. It's an item that still does not exist in this world, so it would place him as a respectable person yet again. He wants to improve their living conditions and hopes to gain some brownie points. But the girls ask him what he is doing here. Noel shows up and tells Alan that she can smell him making things. She wants to make these items as well, so she decides to join him in this process. Alan is a bit surprised to see Noel talking to him this way, as she is usually very reserved and not too keen to talk about anything. She asks her master what he wishes to make, and he explains that he does not want to keep camping with his slaves. This is why he wishes to construct a building with concrete, and this makes Noel ask him what that substance is supposed to be. He tries to explain it first by using the term cement, but that is also something which does not exist in this world. Noel wants to be taught everything, so Alan goes ahead and explains how she will need to get limestone, clay, and quartz. Noel is listening to her master with a lot of intent, and he is pleased to see how responsive she is to his teachings. Some time passes by, and our hero manages to teach Noel each and everything that he knows about building a structure. He tells the dwarf girl that he has only decided to share this with her, but practicing it is a whole other vibe. Noel says that she has more or less understood the whole thing, and now she wants Alan to sit back and watch her at work. She goes on and uses a spell known as extraction, which basically extracts minerals to form items. She is able to summon all the raw materials needed for creating cement, and Alan can't believe Noel has such a useful skill. Of course, this means that his own contributions will be of no consequence, and then we see the dwarf girl using another spell, known as pulverized. This makes our hero realize that Noel also has cheat code skills, which makes things even worse for him if he wants to impress his slaves. The dwarf girl uses her fire and cooling techniques as well, after which we see a whole pile of cement being created in front of our hero's eyes. In order to complete the process, Noel will need some help from Sylphie, and this is because of Alan telling her to use bamboo shoots for the construction process. He said it with a lot of pride back then, but he feels as if he is no longer needed for anything anymore. One good thing, though, is that both the girls have managed to speak with each other more frequently. However, this leads him to believe that his own slave girls will have no further use for him if they team up. They might find him to be useless and will continue to build their own empire without him. Alan needs to watch out for this, but as we all know, he is just being a bit too paranoid about the whole thing. Now, the house is built and ready to be checked, so Alan needs to say something here. Noel goes on to use the hardened skill so that the security of the house is properly done. She is basically a master builder with her skills, and then we see Sylphie filling up the bamboo sticks with mana to strengthen them as well. This makes her the mistress of plants, and both the girls have proven their powers to our hero. Alan wonders why it turned out this way for him, because he wanted to be the one to show off to the girls. They invite him inside the house, but he feels as if they are taunting him for being useless. He laments the fact that he was not reincarnated with a cheat skill like these girls, as he wanted to be strong and flirt with cute babes. Considering the powers of these slave girls, Alan has no idea what will happen to him later. Now, we see the goddess who is watching all the fun from a goddess tablet high up in heaven. She comments that ever since Alan bought Sylphie and Noel, he will be worshipped almost as if he is some kind of demon king. However, at a later point in his life, he will be considered as a threat by the hero of this world. It will cause him to lead a life full of ups and downs. She feels that Alan will turn out to be a very entertaining prospect for her, so she should make fun of him as many times as she can. That's when she corrects herself and says that she actually meant checking up on him as many times as she can. Now, we shift to Noel, who tells us that her dwarf instincts have started to act up ever since she heard what her master told her about cement and concrete. As a matter of fact, it's her first time experiencing such things, and she is actually surprised that Alan's advice has turned out to be true. She did as he told, and she got exactly what she thought she would get. This means that her master is not any random guy who happened to buy her and Sylphie. His restoration power is great, and the fact that he does not want to show off that power is even greater. However, what stands out the most to the dwarf girl is that Alan is not really conceited with the amount of knowledge that he possesses. He's not afraid to share such information, which makes him a true catch in her eyes. On top of that, he was able to teach an elder dwarf such useful things, and it has made Noel very happy. Sylphie has also said that they can put their trust in Alan, so Noel decides to go with the same opinion. She too wants to take the weight off her master's shoulders and contribute to his plans. Our hero takes a nap, but when he wakes up, he notices that there are 2 more buildings in front of him. He can't figure out how this was done so quickly, but then Noel shows up and he realizes that it must have been her doing. She explains that she built 3 buildings so that each of them can have one to themselves. Hearing the dwarf girl say such a thing with so much calmness is not normal to our hero. She then comes close to Alan, but he panics because he does not want his intrusive thoughts to take over again. She says once again that she has built these houses for her, Sylphie, and Alan, but he only says to himself that Noel is a bit too close to his body. The dwarf girl then says that since she has worked hard, she would like her master to praise her efforts. Alan is a bit taken aback by this request, but then Sylphie shows up from behind and asks him to praise Noel as well. He is surprised to see his slave giving him an order, and that's when he figures that the girls must be trying to gang up on him. In other words, he feels that the slave girls are trying to use him for their own work instead of the other way around. He imagines a hilarious scene where both Sylphie and Noel make fun of him for having nothing to boast about himself apart from his restoration skill. He has no money, no talent, and is a rather incompetent person that way. They add further insult to injury by calling him a skinny nerd with no experience in women. Suddenly, the goddess also shows up to join the girls in their roast of Alan. As a matter of fact, they were so worried about his intrusive thoughts that they decided to build extra houses for each other in order to stay away from him. Alan is obviously just imagining all of this, and he makes it worse for himself by thinking the girls look at him as some kind of shameless pig who wants to do shady things to them. His thoughts start to spiral out of control, but then he somehow snaps back to reality when Sylphie asks him if all is well. He comes to his senses and simply plays off whatever was going on in his head till now. He's come this far already, so there's no way he's going to back down now. He is in a position where he can praise Noel for all her hard work, which means that he can pat her on the head as much as he can. This somehow makes him happy because he can at least touch his slave girl now. That's when he proceeds to pat Noel on the head and thank her for her service. This makes her extremely happy, and she smiles to let her feelings be known to our hero. Her hair is very smooth and silky, which is more than enough to get Alan worked up. He finds her to be so cute that his own thoughts are being purified at this moment. Sylphie can see how happy the dwarf girl is, so she feels a bit jealous of her too. Noel starts to blush, so Alan gives her a bit of a push to make her feel even better. However, Sylphie did not expect him to get so intimate with his slave after having the houses built. She then reminds herself that she is an ancient elf, which is an elite species. She should stay true to her kind and not get worked up over a simple patting on the head. Having said that, she feels that she should increase the number of plants that she has harvested so far. Maybe this will get her a pat on the head as well. She tries to convince us that she does not have any other intentions, but it's a bit too late for that. Just like that, a couple more months pass by, and then we see Alan tending to crops by himself yet again. It's almost as if he has forgotten about the powers of his slave girls, and this leads Sylphie to wonder why he doesn't make use of her and Noel. She goes on to explain to us how magic is divided into 5 attributes, namely fire, water, wind, metal, and earth. She has an evolved wind attribute which goes with an aptitude for plants. Noel's aptitudes are with fire and metal, while having an attribute for earth. This means that the both of them make for the perfect combo. After all, this is a combination of food and dwelling, which is amazing for a person like Alan. However, He has never forced them to use their magic against their will, and only lets them use it whenever they feel like it. Sylphie states that he is not blinded by desires, but that couldn't be further from the truth, as Alan simply does not have the guts to do shady things with his slaves. She then comments that he does not like conflict at all and chooses to stay away from any kind of stress. This leads the elf girl to wonder if her master actually wants to live life like a hermit. The only obsession she can observe is that Alan likes yams, but apart from that, he seems to be a really nice guy. Despite this, she is sure that there are things that her master wishes to do, and she wants to know what they are. At the end of the day, Sylphie will not rest till she knows exactly what's going on in our hero's mind. She decides to find out Alan's true feelings by confronting him about it herself. She knows that it can't be because of him being lonely, because he would not have chosen rare species like her, and Noel in the first place if that was the case. Alan asks her what's the matter, and then she says that she wants to hear it from his own mouth. She asks why he ended up buying her and Noel, and she hopes to understand his true aim. Alan tells us that it was only to do unspeakable things to his slave girls, and it really is that simple. However, there's no way he can say this to them. But with Noel also asking the same question, he has to give some kind of answer. Sylphie explains that she and Noel are amongst the rarest of species in this world, so their power is something that simply cannot be imagined. However, he only uses them to make up for the shortfalls around him. She wants to know if there is anything he actually needs them for at all. Of course, this makes no sense to our hero, because he has an endless supply of food and a really nice set of houses to relax in. It's as good as things can get for a man like him. But these girls clearly don't seem to get the message. If they're asking why he is always so kind to them, then it's because they are feeding him and giving him shelter with their powers. If they're asking why he's not tapping into their potential, then it's because he does not want to feel useless despite being their master. It's not like he needs to tap into any further potential for anything at all. He is not going to defeat any demon lord, so he does not need the girls for an adventure. As a matter of fact, if these girls want him to lick their feet, then he will have no other option but to obey. Then again, this is the kind of task that he would enjoy doing, so he wouldn't mind such a question. Now that he is in the hot seat, he has to figure out a lie that will keep these girls interested and satisfied. Now, Sylphie decides to show some more of her magic tree powers to make her master realize just how useful she can be to him. Noel does the same by showing off her high-speed refining skills. However, Alan does not realize that the girls are doing this to show that they can be of use to him. Instead, he takes it that they are both trying to destroy his self-respect. If this is their intention after all, then he might as well spit out the truth and be done with it. He obviously has tons of desires and intrusive thoughts, so he is going to risk it all and say them as they are. In his mind, he says that he wants to do shady things, but out loud, he says that he wants to free the world from hunger, just as we had seen earlier. This leads both the girls to a state of shock, as they most definitely did not expect to hear such a reason. Alan smiles on the outside, but he feels like stabbing himself from the inside. He calls himself a coward, and even states that if he was not the eldest son in his family, then he would have passed away from simply hating himself right then and there. Now, Sylphie thinks about what she just heard and explains to us that the idea of freeing the world from hunger is something that only a god would consider to be ideal. More so, this is not something that you would willingly admit just like that. However, after hearing it, she makes sense of everything that Alan has been doing till now. The yams that he loves so much and treats like treasures are basically effective plants that can even be grown on wastelands. This could indeed help people who suffer from starvation and do not have access to fertile land. This could also explain the weird looks he has on his face from time to time. Sylphie reasons that it could be because of the distant ideal he has envisioned for himself. Now, the elf girl takes a look at Noel and tells her that their master holds a great ideal in his heart. It's so strong and far removed that even they could never have imagined such a thing despite being such rare species. It still might be risky to put her trust in him. But then again, Sylphie has never met a man like Alan her entire life. She stands next to him and says that she wants to follow him and be at his side to see the world he wishes to bring to life. If this is his main goal after all, then the elf girl says that they will need to cultivate more land. Of course, she is giving him way too much credit for a boy who simply wants to get laid. But such is life. Our hero says okay to this, but he is still wondering how such an excuse actually ended up working in his favor. It's actually the first time that he has managed to make a step forward in the eyes of his slave girls. However, Alan will need to stick to this story, now if he is to keep both Sylphie and Noel by his side. Now, our hero tells us that there are only two types of people in this world, winners and losers. The losers like to follow, and the winners like to plan and lead from the front. Similarly, these are the people who either get exploited or do the exploiting themselves. This takes him back to one of his memories in school, where he would get bullied by his classmates. There was a girl named Mizuki who would keep taking his food away from him, and whenever he'd raise an issue, she'd simply say that she was growing girl, so she needed the extra food. As it turns out, Mizuki was actually his little sister, and the fact that even she could bully Alan tells us a lot about how gullible he is. As he remembers her mocking him in one of his memories, our hero wonders if she is doing well back in his original world. Alan fades away thinking about how he has left that life behind and is now reincarnated in a world where he can't even get with his own slaves. Sylphie and Noel bring him back to reality yet again by calling out his name multiple times, and our hero panics because he drifted away into the past to escape his present. The elf girl once again tells him that they should cultivate the land if they are to save the world from hunger. Alan says yes to this, but he curses himself for having made up such a lie when all he wanted to do was act on his intrusive thoughts. The goddess decides to show up as well to mock him one more time. Now, Sylphie thinks of a way to effectively grow multiple crops, but Alan wonders why she hasn't realized his true intentions yet. After all, if she is so smart, then she should at least have gotten a hint of how shady her master really is. This leads him to have confidence issues yet again because he feels that the slave girls are simply taking his lies at face value since they don't really expect much from him at this point. He also fears that at this rate, he will be the one dancing in the palms of his own slaves rather than the other way around. The panic inside his mind goes crazy yet again, and Alan hilariously starts imagining all kinds of unfavorable situations. He still feels that there's some more knowledge from his past life that can be used here, and he plans to utilize that to get his revenge on these slave girls. Of course, he is just imagining things and his slaves actually like him. Now, Alan tells Noel and Sylphie that they should focus on making fertilizer. Of course, they don't know what he means by this, so he says that it is used as a supplement to grow crops on barren land. After all, Sylphie's tree magic may not be a sustainable option in the long run, so they will need an alternate solution. Sylphie also feels that it would be better to use fertilizer because it would result in her using lesser mana for the crops. This way, she can reserve her power for the main crops and enhance the flavor of the plants they're growing. Then, Alan explains to the girls the concept of crop rotation, which means that they will be able to grow everything as per the seasons. Our hero thinks about getting cattle to graze the soil now, which means that he will also get a lot of natural manure to fertilize it. This could be the start of an agricultural revolution and truly change the game of growing plants in this world. Is this finally going to be the big break Alan was looking for all this time? Also, will he finally have the guts to tell his slaves the true nature of his intrusive thoughts? Like, share, and subscribe to find out in the next video. Hit the bell icon to get notified when I upload part 2. See you soon.